This is Mjfontaine podcast. This is episode 13, and the title of this podcast is Truth and Story. The reason I started this podcast was to just share my experiences, stories from the work I've done in the past 20 years, and also have people on here now and again to share stories, their experiences, their knowledge, so we can have a reference and a point of reference actually where we can create more dialogue. A lot of people have live videos, which is really effective, but there's something about listening to words, especially when our focus is so much on our phones and social media. We're constantly looking down at our phones or at a screen. We no longer just sit back and rest our eyes and really engage our third eye and our 2 ears listening. Well, hopefully we've got 2 ears. But, listening to what is being said. And that is the beauty of podcasts. That's why podcasts are, having a revival. So for me, it was really important that I felt a really urge and a calling. And I keep saying this more or less every week, because every time I go to, create a podcast, I have a title in mind, but I don't really have a script. And I didn't want it to seem like it was work, because then I would stop doing it. And it's really important that I can have a connection and that it's, somewhat spontaneous. Otherwise, the joy comes out of it. And I really want to create a space where I can dialogue, or I can speak, or I can mess up in a real heartfelt way, like I'm having a conversation with you. So that is why when I did create this actual topic, truth and story, I thought, well, maybe I should do research. Maybe I should speak about, the meaning behind truth and story. But I actually want to talk about it, speak about it, discuss this topic in a way, in the same way it would come up in a session with a client. What is truth and what is a story? What is our story? What is your story? What is my story? And what is my truth? So we'll start with truth first, because I think the story will be much longer. But, the truth is a place where our authentic self exists within us. So we have our truth and we have the truth. Now, I think that statement is a bit of a philosophical question, because the truth in relation to whom? So you have 2 people that have both sides of their story or their truth. But wouldn't it be subjective, because it's relating to their own experiences? So, for example, I'm playing tennis with somebody, and I think that the other person has hit the ball, is being aggressive when they're playing against me, and the other person may just be really getting into the game. What is the truth really? Because isn't it based upon somebody's belief or belief system? Or is it just defined more accurately through the situation that one is in or people are in? So does truth relate to context? So is the truth viable or fair or transparent when it's in the right context? because that's something I wrestle with sometimes, because I always believe that we have our own version of the truth. And I know someone will say, yeah, you got your own version of truth, but there is the truth. But again, that's contextual and that's down to experience. If I believe black people or white people are no good, no matter what the world is saying, it's wrong, it's injustice, it's my belief. But then we can go to another extreme of committing murder. You know, that is wrong in a human rights, in the human, in the eyes of the world and in terms of a human rights perspective. But if somebody really believes in their own mind that they're cleansing the world or they're doing something that is right, then it's their truth. And this is what we seek to kind of work with, when you're working with NLP or you're working with coaching, you're going into that, you're setting a goal with somebody or you're reaching an outcome with somebody, but you actually, the beauty of it is going into their world and what is important for them, what is their truth and what is their story. So oftentimes, a client would speak about an experience and, talk about it, and then they would give this big sigh and then they'll say, you know what, I just am so tired. And for me, that's their truth. Is that place when they stare into space and they just sigh and they just breathe out the truth, their truth. Sometimes we can be angry, but underneath that, our truth really is that we're tired or we're fed up or we're always having to show up and we're always having to work hard and we just want a break. We just may need a simple rest. Or we just may need a cuddle, or we just may need someone to say you are on the right track. But we jump into something else. We're not in our truth. So, it's about, again, I think identifying your truth is having somebody witness you speak about your truth, or maybe having someone help you unpack what is what is not your truth. And often that relates to a story. And a story, what we have can be good or bad. Our story could be tied to our purpose. So our story and our truth are combined in one. And it's when we know why we're here and what we're here to do, So our stories, I've come from this situation, but I've evolved from that situation, and I'm not my, I'm not my, the traumas that happened to me, but I'm rewriting my story into one of positivity and service. But you would often find somebody who's changed their life story is living their truth and living their purpose. They never really say they're living their story, do they? You tend to find a story can be a script or a dynamic or a dysfunction that we kind of play again and again and again. We play it in maybe the jobs we go to, we play it in the relationships we have with other people and with the opposite sex or same sex. We play it in terms of money. We play it in terms of hiding. We hide from the world. That's our story, because we create a story in our head of how the world is going to respond to us. And I'll give an example with myself. I remember when I just left art college, I had to go to work to earn money. And my mum was like, you just need to get a job. So I gave up an idea of going to university and worked in an office. I hated that. And it's funny because I'm talking to a lot of young people now, and the shock that they're experiencing when they leave university and going into the world of work, it's such a come down from this place where they've been kind of protected or living in their own world. So I came down and I just was getting more and more depressed and not realizing it until I started to have full-blown panic attacks. But because I didn't want to be, nobody knew about panic attacks in those days. And because I didn't want to be separated or be called, or called strange, and, people are already identifying me of what's wrong with her. There's something wrong with her. Not realizing that psychologically my spirit was saying, we're not having this. You're dying here. You're in a place where your creativity is just being put to sleep. But with that experience, my spirituality was born, which, so out of the negative situation became a blessing. But my story was, I didn't want to be that person that would be different. So I would go along sometimes to events to go out and dance with my sisters and family, and I would experience moments of, that unreality you can experience sometimes when you get a panic attack. So I would be in the corner, I would be smiling with everybody, but I'd be breathing. I'd be, breathing, trying to focus on something else, because all of a sudden, every now and again, I would feel like a panic attack was coming on, but I would lie to the people I was around. I would pretend that nothing was going on. I didn't want them to know that I was having a panic attack, because I didn't want to bother people. So I learned to lie to myself. I didn't know how to take care of myself and say, actually, I'm feeling panicky. I mean, the good thing what came out of that is that literally grew out of them, or probably got a boyfriend and had a major distraction, and my panic attacks just stopped just like that. Very strange. I think again I was soul searching and starting to go on workshops and starting to understand myself, but at the time I'd met a guy that was really attentive, really focused, was really supportive in anything I did, and I think that that kind of helped the situation with me to start understanding who I was. But that was that story. Again, catapulting wildly into the future. I'm woman, late 30s, no children, still haven't got children now, but I had no children. My story was, I'm not a woman. And again, not knowing how to navigate myself when I would talk to people that had children, not knowing where to place myself. So my story became a victim, poor me, look what's happened to me. I can't fit into this place. So I would avoid situations. And I'm going to talk about that in the next podcast, about childlessness, not having children. And the blessings that come with just surrendering to that situation. So out of a negative experience comes a positive experience, and life is really funny like that. But at the time, that would be my story. I didn't want to go there because I don't fit in, so I'm going to hide. So I would avoid social situations where people that I knew from school, I would probably be exposed to them, and they'll be saying, well, have you got any children? And, I would be dreading that look of people saying, oh, you haven't got any kids? Okay, well, you still got time. So that became my story, of I'm not going there because I'm not so much a woman, I can't fit in. And then I avoided situations because it became my story. I didn't want to face the truth of where I was, and I felt like I didn't have enough self-worth or inner strength or inner belief to just stand as a woman and say I'm okay, because the society puts a lot on women when they don't have children for various reasons. But at the time, I made this whole story my own because I couldn't stand in truth, and I couldn't just be in a place where I didn't want to face my reality of that. And looking back, I realised how much my story was based around being accepted by others. I tell you something now, I do not give a rat's ass or toss or two hoots about not having children and being a woman now. It does not bother me because I have so many so-called adopted children. I've got beautiful godchildren, and I realise there's such a strong impermanence in life that you can be here one minute and you're gone the next. And I've witnessed people leave the planet with children and some people without children. And in the end of the day, life, it's children are the biggest blessing one can have. But also not all of us are meant to have biological children. But at the time, I didn't know that. It took me a long time to go through a whole story of that situation. I stand here strong in my power now. But that was my story. When somebody walks through my doors and they sit down and they have a session with me, it's not long before I identify the story. And more often than not, the story is passed down from generation to generation, unconscious or conscious. A lot of the times the story is about the lack of attention. The lack of attention or recognition, I would say actually. The lack of recognition for who somebody is. So the truth of that person. So what's happening in our environment and in our homes is so much projection. Because one person, Exhibit A, the elder, has a story that they've inherited. They project it on Exhibit B, the younger person, who then becomes that story, who then becomes that negative affirmation, and who then starts to believe that story. And doesn't understand where their truth lies until they go through a set of really negative experiences of feeling really low or anxious, and then we have to do the work of unpacking and looking at what the truth is, and that's really kind of really challenging as well, because it's a long process. Sorry, I had to just let cats out. A cat out. It's a long process sometimes, and sometimes it can happen really quickly. But the strength, the antidote of pain, the antidote of suffering, the antidote of not being seen, the antidote of not living in your purpose is unpacking to find out what your truth is. You know, putting the story on the shelf, and really looking at what the truth is. And that's really hard because a lot of people are carrying around somebody else's story projected upon them. And the clue to knowing your truth or understanding your truth is looking at the fairy tales you liked as a child. Because within that fairy tale, there is a connection, there's a resonance with the character in the fairy tale. And when you dig deep, you find it out. I always loved Cinderella, I know. But The Ugly Duckling was one of the most appealing and sad stories that I loved. And it was about somebody not fitting in but finding their tribe, and also finding themselves, because he stared in the mirror and saw a beautiful swan, and it was about looking in your reflection, looking your insight as well. So looking at the nursery rhymes, or the nursery stories that you loved as a child, is a good indicator of the story, your truth. finding out what your story is when you have your dialogue with people and you're saying, I always seem to attract, I always seem to do. The people that you're attracting are the actors or the walk-on parts of your story. So if you're always getting people that are not committed to you or abandoning you, your story is about commitment. And it's about your level of commitment as well. It could be more than likely. So what is your truth? You don't believe that you have your is it that you don't believe that you are, you're of a value, worth, time, value, commitment? It could be, your story could be a lot of drama, because that's what you came into in life. You came into drama, and that was inherited because you came into a household with drama. So the only way you can function is to have the external stimuli, because that's what your body, your physiology is used to. But your truth may be that you desire so much peace, but you're serving the needs of your physiology, your body, your habits. Those are the things you're serving, and you're serving it with perhaps drama and excitement, because that's what your body has learnt from childhood to be tense when there's a tumultuous situation that you're brought up into. So that could really affect you getting behind the peace. So your story could be drama, your truth is peace. Somebody who isolates themselves from a lot of people continuously, day in, day out, have very little, they say they're an empath, which could be the truth, excuse the pun. But again, it could be that the story is about peace, and, no, the story is about isolation, which is very different to aloneness, or being alone, or being sort of introverted, because you have to be introverted for a time. So there's a point of going within and taking time out for self, and developing yourself spiritually on your own. And there's isolation, where you're frozen in isolation, and that may be a conditioning, that may be a story. And the truth may be you want connection. Another one, which is really, really, I see a lot, is when your story is that you're you're a giver. You're a person that serves everybody else. You give, but you're always caught up in, again, a drama or a falling out. And your truth is that you're not stepping up in terms of living your purpose. Your story is because you are doing well in a job, but the truth is your purpose. And this is not about being a poor artist or a poor healer, but it's just showing up, because healers are everybody. They're in everywhere. You don't just have to be putting crystals on somebody to be a healer. It's such a loose word. But you may need to be showing up in your side business. I said to somebody today, you need, your truth is as a person that is helping other people, but in the right context. Because when you're out of context with your life's purpose, you become mischievous. It's like a benevolent spirit. You become mischievous. So because it's not within the right spiritual protocol and spiritual and psychological boundaries. So every healer, every coach, every therapist, every psychotherapist needs a container for which to do their work. But if you're doing this, you're an unofficial counsellor. When you're doing this sort of thing from 9 a.m. to maybe 12 at night, whereas the other people that are getting paid for that, and they're working with strangers. They're doing the work in a contained space where they can maintain perfect or good boundaries, and where they can maintain their energy and they're not getting drained. And that's the difference of doing your work using the correct spiritual protocols, as opposed to doing the work on the sideline, dipping your toes in because you are afraid to show up. Because your truth is about showing up. Your story is about hiding and using a back door. So, what is your truth? If you're not being seen, you're not in your truth, you're not living, or you're not working part-time or once a month volunteering in your truth, serving the truth of who you are, then what I would love you to do is to rewrite your story. Rewrite your story. Visualize, dream, plan. What is it you want to have in your life? How do you want to show up? What support do you need for you to show up? For some people, it may need somebody to hold their hand, like a coach or a therapist. Another person, it could be a training course. For somebody else, it may need, I just really want to be doing something, but I want to have a supportive partner. And the one I have now is not supporting me. So I need to work on getting my self-worth first, getting rid of this person, and then supporting myself for my dream. Or it could be allowing my partner to help me. Whatever it is you need to be in your truth, just write that down in the form of a story. Just write down notes of what your ideal scene. What is your ideal scene? I remember doing this from Shakti Gawain's book, Not Living in the Light, because that was the book that changed my life. But creative visualization, about writing your ideal scene. And at first it was so hard, but I tell you what, I did that continuously whenever I felt rock bottom. And a lot of what I have and a lot of what I've obtained has been through creatively visualizing. This was like blood into my veins. It really, really helped me plan and visualize and rewrite my story. It really did. So, what is your new story? Not your heritage story, not the story that's holding you back and keeping you in the place of hiding. What is your story? So, let me know how you felt this podcast was for you. If you've got any comments, let me know. Please subscribe on iTunes. The link is on this podcast, as well as SoundCloud. And just share it with people that you think it may help, because again, it's really helping people, and it's something that I would love that people that have not been introduced to my work get the benefit from these podcasts. You can contact me. I am having a 3-month spiritual mentorship program. It's going to be in person in London, but there will be facilities for people to do it at a distance. So it's mostly in-person meetups, but there will be aspects, or there will be opportunities for people that are not in London to be part of this course, because it's 3 months. It's a weekly course for 2 of the months. There's a week where I'll be away, so we'll have catch up, and that's probably when I'll get guest speakers to come in and talk about spiritual mentorship. And we'll have monthly meetups if you're physically in London. And again, it's a spiritual mentorship, so it's all aspects around spiritual development, but it's like having your own coach, but just as a group coaching method instead of just you're having me one-to-one. And if you go onto my website, mjfontaine.co.uk, you'll be able to find the information there. So, this is Mjfontaine signing off. Join us next week when I'll be covering childlessness and the places where we can mother ourselves and mother other people that are not our biological or our children. We can mother children that are not our biological children, and the statistics based upon the statistics that's around today of how many people are not going to be having children moving forward, and also the spiritual reasons why. So, this is Mjfontaine signing off. Until next week, bye-bye.